I ended up on Coastal Command on Halifax's on a long-range meteorological squadron. There were about 5 operating in the country, and I was posted to 519 Squadron at Lucas in Scotland. And the object of the exercise was we carried a very rare aircrew member called a Met Observer, who wore a harp wing with M in it. And we would go out for about 9-10 hour flight, covering about nearly 2,000 miles. The Met Observer would be taking readings all the time, and myself and the other wireless operator, we carried two wireless operators, would get the message to send back to base from the Met Observer, and immediately all this information would go back to base. Now that was going on in 4 other different places dotted around the UK, and this was getting near the end of the war then, and 519 Squadron I was on was disbanded. So we as a crew went over to Aldergrove in Northern Ireland to 518 Squadron. And the squadron badge, now, it's disbanded of course, was a key with a fist holding it, and underneath the motto, "We hold the key." The story behind that is, you may well have heard that D-Day was put off 24 hours due to weather, and it was 518 Squadron in Aldergrove flying out in the Atlantic that sent that information back, which delayed D-Day for 24 hours. Well, the war had ended by now, and we were the only squadrons who were actually doing what was counted as operational flying by that time. Every trip we did was an operation. A lot of the squadrons had been disbanded by then. I mean, Bomber Command had no need for that anymore. But we carried on operationally, and I believe they carried on to the 1950s, early 1950s. We were flying Halifaxes, and 518 Squadron at Aldergrove in Northern Ireland, we had a detachment down at Gibraltar, and eventually our crew went down there to do our time down at Gibraltar. So I think, looking back, I did most of my flying at Gibraltar. We had set courses to do, and the one at Gibraltar was halfway out to the Azores, and then a reciprocal way back, reciprocal bearing back. The one at Aldergrove was a sort of triangle up into the North Atlantic, southwest again, and then east back to Aldergrove. The one at Lucas, which I started, was right up almost to the Arctic Circle and back down the coast of Norway. And of course, which reminds me of the first operation we did, which was up to the Arctic Circle and back down again. Our navigator, it was his first operation, as it was mine. He got us lost. And I can remember sitting on a very antique radar set. We were lost off the coast of Norway looking for what we called land returns. The weather was atrocious, because that's another thing. There's no point in having a meteorological squadron if you're going to be grounded by weather, because that's your whole purpose of flying. Anyway, I was sitting on this radar set trying to look for what we call ground returns, and I became very airsick. And believe you me, it's difficult to believe this. I can remember sitting on that radar set hoping that we would crash into the mountains of Norway and end it all. I'm not exaggerating, I really can. That's what air sickness can do. But that really was a good thing in a way, because I was never airsick again. Never, never. Anyway, we had an interesting year down at Gibraltar, and then De Mob came round, and I had at one time agreed to sign on for 18 months, and then being very young and inexperienced, and I cancelled that signing on and felt that it's time to go back to Sidbury Street and start not doing something useful, that's not the right, but trying to live a realistic life. And when during the war, when I left school, I went and worked as a junior temporary clerk in the Westminster Bank for 10 months. And when I came out of the Air Force, I wanted to join the Metropolitan Police, but my father talked me out of it. And eventually I ended up going back to the Westminster Bank. They had undertaken to take back all those temporary clerks they had employed during the war, but it was an understanding they would only take 25% of them onto the permanent staff. And I thought I was lucky at the time because I got taken on the permanent staff. But after about 4 years of that, and after flying, I think I got depressed now, looking back on it. So I joined an overseas bank, a British bank, and spent quite a bit of time in India and East Africa, working in banking. Got a bit fed up with that, came back, I'm nearly there, and at the age of 42 became a mature student. I applied to join the probation service as a probation officer, did my 2 years training, had a marvellous time. I really enjoyed that job, and retired at the age of 65 as a senior probation officer. That was management. Then I went back on a part-time basis doing part-time relief work until I was 72, when I finally retired.